Welcome to the It's Been Said podcast. I'm your host, SAI Executive Director Lisa Ramey. Today's episode is a special edition of the It's Been Said podcast. Matt Carver, Legal Services Director, will discuss his perspective on current legal topics relevant to district and school administrators. He'll offer his insights on this subject matter periodically over the coming months. Let's hear from Matt.
This is Matt Carver, and this is SAI's Legal Vortex. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the more difficult issues. One of the topics that I'll receive, I'll get calls or emails about situations in which administrators have maybe had an employee come to them. Maybe it's a fellow teacher of one of the employees, another worker in the district, and they share that there are some concerns that the employee that's the subject of a possible investigation or concern maybe has some type of disability, whether it's they're having a mental health issue or some other issue, but the employee, as of yet, hasn't brought to your attention that they have any type of disability or they're working through some type of medical issue of some sort. So, how do you work through that? How do you process those situations where you have behavior that might be odd? Employees, I've received calls before where employees might be apparently talking to someone who's not present there in the room or in a building. Maybe they're slurring their speech, maybe they're falling asleep, or there's something else that's occurring that's bringing this possible issue, again, a potential disability or some other type of health issue to the forefront, and now it's been brought into your office as a concern. So, how do you work through that? So, that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing when I get these types of calls or emails, that I remind administrators that your number one duty, and this is always the case, is to ensure that your staff and your students and visitors that are in the building are safe. So keep that in mind. So is the behavior such where there's a concern that maybe an employee is not going to be able to adequately supervise students? Is there a concern that maybe it's an employee in your kitchen and, well, based off their behavior, you're concerned that they're more likely to slip and fall, they're more likely to accidentally cut themselves even because of their behavior and their actions or whatever issues that are coming up, these symptoms of what appears to be some other problem. And so always remember that. And when in doubt, it's appropriate, just know that you have that authority to pull that individual from that location, whether it's a classroom or whether it's the kitchen or some other location there in your district, and pull them from that out of that situation to ensure that students are safe, to ensure that they're safe. And then once you've done that, then you can try to work through some of the other things I'll talk about here to try to figure out potentially what's going on and to hopefully assist that employee, but bottom line, to ensure that everyone's safe and that the employee is able to do their job as they were hired to do. So again, safety comes first. So please remember that. Now, as you're working with that student, so you have, again, something's been brought to your attention. Usually it's coming from other staff members. It's okay, of course, to go and maybe they've brought some you might decide that you're going to go and observe the behavior, see what you're noticing to ensure that the individual is still able to safely perform their job. But as you're working through those situations, focus on beyond the safety. We want to consider, is this individual able to perform the essential functions of their job, whether they have an accommodation or not? So again, the focus of today's podcast relates to situations where they haven't shared with you that they need an accommodation, but just keep in mind they need to be able to perform those essential functions of the job. Now, with that, one of the really important things that I encourage you to take some time as an administrative team is to go back and really do a good job of looking through your job descriptions. How thorough are your job descriptions? And this is especially important, I would say, for your classified staff. And it's important for your licensed staff as well, for the certified staff, but for your classified staff as well, where they're performing certain tasks, where maybe they're having to lift certain amounts of weight, or they're needing to do some other things, perhaps, or more physical in nature. That's where I'd really make sure that you've done a good job as an administrative team in a district to work through, that you have very thorough job descriptions. Whether you're hiring, of course, when you're hiring, you want to ensure that you're doing that at that time. But even if it's someone who you're hoping to maintain that employee, you're hoping to work through this situation, look at the job description. Is there enough detail in there? Because what you would do when you have these types of concerns is you're going to point back to, hey, we're looking at your performance right now. Okay. And one of the cautions that I would share with you is you want to make sure that you're not attempting to diagnose or speculate why the employee is performing in a certain way. All right. So it might be that all these different things are being shared, details are being shared with you. It sure seems like maybe there is possibly, let's say, a mental health concern of some sort. Maybe they're having an issue with, I mean, who knows what it might be. They might be bipolar, it might be even schizophrenia or something. You don't know. And so that could be the case. But again, go back to their actual actions and the performance, and then take that performance, those actions, and then look at what their job description is and whether or not they're fulfilling that job description. One, that they're doing it safely, and two, that they're able to perform those essential functions of the job. Okay, so really be thinking about that. But again, do not attempt to diagnose. That's not your place to do that. That's where districts and administrators can run into issues legally. If you're starting to say things, you say to the employee, boy, it appears to me that you have this mental health issue. Do you need some help with that? No, stay away from that type of language. Rather than stating that, say, Mr. Carver, I just have some concerns. You're falling asleep. You're seeming to sort of stagger a little bit when you're walking. You're talking, frankly, and you can say this. You appear to be talking to someone who's not there, or whatever those facts are that you're absolutely able to share with them as you're meeting with the employee, and going over those facts and why it's a concern. Again, one, with safety, and then also it's a concern because, due to the fact they're falling asleep, they're not able to perform their job in the classroom. They're not able to perform their job in the kitchen. They're not able to perform their job doing maintenance there in the district, or whatever that case might be for that particular role. Okay. So stay away from diagnosing. As you're talking to them through on this performance, you can also talk to them about things relating, and it's perfectly okay to share with them uh, programs you have that are of assistance. And you can do that without implying to them or asserting to them that they have a particular issue. But it's okay to say, hey, I just want to make you aware we do have these other programs that our employees may take advantage of, that may be helpful. Now, once you do that, whether you start talking about that performance, or whether you bring up those programs, at that point it might be that employee then opens up to you and starts sharing. Okay, and then the conversation changes. If they start sharing and they start mentioning, well, actually, I have been receiving some help from a psychiatrist, or I have been going to a therapist, or I have been seeing a doctor or nurse practitioner about a particular issue. well, then that changes the conversation because now they're the ones that have shared that with you. Okay. But just leave it to the employee. It's their choice whether or not to share that type of confidential medical information. But it's your choice to decide as a district whether or not you're going to continue to employ an individual or whether you need to put an individual on leave because they're not performing or because they're not safe. So try to ensure that you're sort of considering both of those things as you're working with that particular employee. And I found over the years it's very common that the employee then will mention something. And I've had numerous instances where I've gotten calls where someone's really been acting odd, or they might have seemed even like they were under the influence of something. Well, it turns out that the employee then shares on their own that they started taking a new medication. And maybe because of this new medication, perhaps it's being taken legally, that they're reacting to it in a certain way. Okay. So those types of things come up regularly. So anyway, those are some of the key points of discussion that I'd have at least starting out. Now, if they're choosing not to mention a disability, they're choosing not to mention, they're not asking for any type of accommodation. And again, that's really on them to ask if they want some accommodation there. Otherwise, if they're not asking for that, you keep focusing on performance. You keep focusing on the facts. You keep focusing on those observable things. You keep focusing on the things in their job description that they're not fulfilling and that are necessary for them to be able to be a successful employee in the district. And if again, they have the right not to share it, but as I alluded to earlier, they don't have a right to necessarily have a job in the district there if they're not fulfilling the essential functions of the job. So with that, just escalate discipline. Now, I know I don't want to necessarily jump to discipline. It might be initially, it's more of a safety issue. You're concerned for them, you're concerned for students, you're concerned for others in the building. But the bottom line is that you absolutely, and you might need to, move down the path of discipline and escalating discipline if they're having repeated behaviors and some type of repeated behavior, again, whether it's in a classroom or some other setting in your school, that's not meeting the standards that are required to perform that job, then it's going to be an escalating discipline situation. It might initially be some type of write-up. It might then lead to being placed on leave with pay or something of the sort, and unfortunately, it might ultimately be that they need to be terminated. Now, with this, as you get into some of these complicated situations, of course, don't hesitate because it can be pretty nuanced with the law on some of this. Don't hesitate to give me a call, to give your attorney for your school district a call to work through this so they can help to ensure that you're following appropriate steps and you're not violating rights that those employees have relating to disability law and such. So keep that in mind as well. Don't feel that you need to do it on your own. Give me a call, give your district's legal counsel a call, and work through these situations so you put a plan in place of how you're going to work with that student, or excuse me, that staff member. I will mention, and not everyone's aware of this, but the alcoholism, for instance, let's say it relates to something like alcoholism. Alcoholism is a disability that it has been recognized by the federal government. So you do have some situations where maybe it relates to alcoholism. However, while that if that employee comes to you and shares, well, actually, I've been struggling with this, and well, you might have those programs that can help to assist them with that, and you might provide some accommodation as far as them to be able to go to meet with someone, to be able to take some leave to perform some of these things, as far as going to classes or otherwise getting supports for that. But those protections that are in place for situations where it's not after they've already shown up for work under the influence. They haven't already come to work and brought alcohol into the building. And so keep in mind that in those instances, there's still going to be those consequences. And while the district might choose, after there is that discipline, that let's say if it does relate to alcohol, the district may choose to still employ that individual, may choose to still allow them to work through these programs, but that point, that's really up to the district whether or not you're going to allow it. And keep in mind, of course, if they bring alcohol to the building on school property, a school vehicle, or anything like that, it's a mandatory call to law enforcement. If they're showing up under the influence of alcohol or another substance, it's a mandatory report to the BOEE. And so just remember those things as well that you might need to do. But I did want to mention that because that does happen on occasion. Another thing that'll happen occasionally is that you'll get calls or you might get some communication from a family member. I've had calls in the past where the principal or the superintendent said, "Hey, we got a call from the spouse. We got a call from a parent about this employee and their concerns about the employee." And once you have that information, and if you do receive those calls, just take in the information. Now, be careful not to violate the employee, even with a spouse. Be careful not to violate the employee's confidentiality rights. Don't say to that spouse, "Oh, by the way, yeah, we had some concerns. Your spouse did this in the classroom today. Your spouse did this in the kitchen today. Your spouse did this while they're working some other place in the district." Don't share that. That'd be a violation. But you can certainly take in that information that's being shared, and then now that that's being shared with you by that family member, it is okay then to have a conversation with the employee about that information that's being shared. So that's another thing that I just wanted to mention that does come up. So these are some of the main things I wanted to talk to you about on this podcast. I hope you find it helpful, but just remember, one, safety first. Look at your job descriptions, make sure the employee is fulfilling the essential functions of the job, focus on the facts. Focus as you're meeting with the employee, focus on the facts and performance, focus on those things, and leave it up to the employee to bring up whether or not there is some other medical issue that then they're going to bring to your attention, where maybe then you're working with the employee to accommodate a possible disability, or to just take that in account as a mitigating factor for whatever that behavior, or those acts, or the performance has been. Finally, I'd mention, if you have something where it's during the workday, and again, you're needing to sort of pull that employee just because you're so concerned because of their behavior and it just doesn't seem safe, then you want to ensure that they're not then driving home, of course. So if they drove to work, you want to ensure they're not driving home. I'd talk to the employee about that. In some instances, it might be that you or someone else is then driving them home, and then maybe they're able to get the vehicle later. The employee might give you permission that, "Hey, here's my emergency contact. You can contact them. Maybe they come pick them up." But that's something else that I wanted to mention, because you want to ensure if there's someone who's not safe to be doing their job or to be in the building, they're probably in many instances not safe to be out driving on the streets. So with that, that's all I have for this podcast. It is a very difficult situation. And so again, I hope you found this helpful, and don't hesitate to give me a call. I appreciate what all of you do to help kids in our schools. Thanks so much.